In 1972, Patricia Crowther was 7 miles underground. She and a team of spelunkers were covered in mud, quote, like chocolate frosting. She squeezed her 115-pound body through a narrow canyon that no one else had the frame or will to traverse. On the other side, she found a signature. Pete H. This little piece of writing meant history. She had discovered a link between the Mammoth and Flint Ridge cave systems, and spelunkers had been searching for the connection between the combined 144 miles of tunnels for decades. Patricia met her husband William Crowther at MIT, where they both studied physics and would often go spelunking together. After finishing school, William Crowther went to go work on the ARPANET team, and Patricia and William had 2 girls together. But in 1976, the two divorced. These are the circumstances that Colossal Cave Adventure sprung from. William Crowther wrote the code in Fortran, and he designed it to emulate the Mammoth cave system in immaculate detail. Hours and days spent replicating the place that he and Patricia had explored together. Colossal Cave Adventure, or just Adventure, is a seminal work in the history of video games. Supposedly, work would stop for a week when a copy of Adventure made its way into any computer-minded office, as folks dropped everything to discover its secrets. Colossal Cave Adventure would go on to inspire numerous other works, including Mystery House, Rogue, and of course, never forget, Zork. So we can thank Colossal Cave Adventure for interactive fiction, action-adventure, and roguelike genres as we know them today. But why did William Crowther make it exactly? The story goes that after the divorce, William made it to connect with his 2 daughters, to show them the magic of computer science and the magic of the place where their parents spent so many hours together. When they visited their dad, they spent time playing interactive fiction games together, one of which was Adventure. So maybe this is a story about a father connecting to his daughters. That's really sweet. But one of William's caving companions describes the divorce as a catastrophic event, something he wasn't over even 30 years later. They described Adventure as a cathartic exercise. So maybe this is a story about a man seeking to retrace a love that's long lost. That's a bummer. Which is it? A nice thing to do with your daughters, or a cathartic reflection of love lost? Almost 40 years later, Adventure would get a kind of spiritual sequel. Kentucky Route Zero is a game by Cardboard Computer, and it pulls deeply from old-fashioned interactive fiction games, like Adventure. It's about a descent into the Mammoth Cave system. But rather than dragons and goblins, this version takes on a magical realist tone. The titular Route Zero is a subterranean highway that runs through the Mammoth Cave system. And, like Adventure, Kentucky Route Zero is a mystery. Cardboard Computer's Jake Elliott discusses why Kentucky Route Zero is a mystery game. He borrows from U.S. intelligence think tank super smart guy Greg Treverton for the definition.
So he says that a puzzle is something that you could solve if only you had all the information. A mystery is more like a situation where you have too much information, you don't know what's relevant, and in fact you have no guarantee that any of it is relevant, and you have no guarantee that a solution exists to the problem at all.
In a military context, finding Osama bin Laden is a puzzle. There's just one right answer that, if you get enough information, you'll find it. But the Cold War is a mystery. We didn't even know what we needed to know, and any information we got just led to more questions. Jake Elliott succinctly quotes Treverton to explain that
a mystery cannot be answered, it can only be framed.
Why did William Crowther make Adventure? Well, it's kind of a mystery. So it's only fitting that Kentucky Route Zero, while not a puzzle game, is a mystery game. If that's true, then maybe the mystery is what Kentucky Route Zero is even about. When you pose this question to fans of the game, you get answers like ghosts, debt, the American dream, an underground highway, loss, the way life goes. And all these answers, infuriatingly, are all correct. But they're not really good answers, are they? They don't tell you what to expect if you play Kentucky Route Zero. They don't describe the experience of the game. So, the maybe impossible task I've set for myself is to explain to you what Kentucky Route Zero is about. We'll begin with my one-word answer. What is Kentucky Route Zero about? Grief. Equally as infuriating as all the other answers, right? Well, remember, a mystery can't be answered. It can only be framed. And the framing we'll use today is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. You've probably heard them before. Stage 1, denial. You refuse to accept the reality of the loss. Stage 2, anger. Experiencing frustration and resentment. Stage 3, bargaining. Making deals and/or promises in an attempt to delay the loss. Stage 4, depression, feeling deep sadness and despair. Stage 5, acceptance, coming to terms with the reality of the loss. Kentucky Route Zero was released in 5 acts. What if each act relates to one of the stages of grief? And if Kentucky Route Zero is about grief, what's it even grieving? Who died? Well, unfortunately, what is Kentucky Route Zero grieving is also a mystery. And my response to that question, it kind of escapes words a little bit. I can't just tell you, you have to kind of go through it yourself to truly understand it on an instinctive level. So, spoilers ahead, let's begin our journey down the Zero together. And at the end, you'll have enough context to understand what is Kentucky Route Zero grieving. We open on a man, a truck, and a dog. The dog's name is either Homer, Blue, or maybe I don't care what the dog's name is. After all, this choice has no impact on the events of the game. No, your choices don't affect our character's future. They only color in how they feel about the past. The man, Conway, is tasked with something that seems straightforward. Deliver antique furniture to an address, 5 Dogwood Drive. In another game, this would be the tutorial. We learn how to play with a simple task like delivering furniture, and then the real fun begins. Though, the longer you keep believing that Dogwood Drive is just around the corner, the deeper you're sinking into denial. First things first, we need directions. A gas station attendant tells us we'll find Dogwood Drive on a highway called the Zero. But to get to that, we're gonna need to go to the Marquez farmhouse. And to get there, we'll need an address on his computer. And to get that, we'll need to go down to the basement and throw the breaker because the power's out. This winding path, just to learn a little piece of information, is a synecdoche for the entire game. It's just never that easy. In the basement, we encounter 3 people hunched over a board game: Emily, Bob, and Ben. Conway tries to address them, but they just ignore him. It's almost like they're in denial too, but it's denial of our existence. I don't know, maybe they're ghosts or something. With the power back on and the address finally in hand, we go to the Marquez farmhouse. We meet Weaver Marquez, the mathematician. We've been told that she's a genius, but on meeting her, we learn she's one of those absent-minded geniuses. That gas station attendant asked us to deliver her a TV, so we set the TV down on her request and we set it up. We turn it on and... the camera zooms in. This is a deliberate choice made by Tomas Kamenci, who was responsible for a lot of Kentucky Route Zero's art direction. This particular shot was designed to mimic the camera movement in films like Tarkovsky's Stalker, where the camera is moving slowly and intentionally through layers of a frame. The result are these long shots where the audience has ample time to consider the frame in front of them. The cardboard computer team calls these moments like the one at the TV the half-asleep moments. Prior to this zoom in, the camera was fairly fixed. We were keeping our distance from the characters in the scene. However, when that TV flicks on, the only camera movement is along the Z-axis. This has the effect of pulling us into the moment, halting that consistent pacing from before and giving us no option but to sit and stare. The intention here is to create a state of dreaming while being awake, a reverie. In this state, we lose track of where we are, when we are, what we were doing, and simply give ourselves to the flow of time for a little while. We may feel hypnotized. However, crucially, we're in full control here. The moment ends at our prompting. A click of the mouse zooms the camera right back out, and it reveals a trick that's been played on us. Weaver's gone, and the farmhouse is dark. Whenever Weaver spoke to us, she seemed distracted, like her mind wasn't fully present. Maybe her body wasn't either. Maybe Weaver was a ghost. This is the kind of magical realism that we can expect from Kentucky Route Zero.
Did you know that?
When designing environments, Cardboard Computer took a lot of inspiration from theater sets, in particular modern set design. Traditional old-fashioned designers might use painted backdrops and pulleys to create the illusion of place during a play. There's a literal interpretation of where the characters are. However, modern set designers have moved away from this literalist approach towards the metaphorical. The set is now a place where emotional realities are depicted. For example, a set designer might blur the line between what's inside and what's outside to create a sense of claustrophobia and disorientation. The feeling that these characters have no inside to run and hide in, nor any outside to escape into. Joe Mielziner was a legendary set designer. He used this exact approach when designing the set for Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Premiering in 1949, this set featured the backdrop of a crowded city that appeared hunched and looming over the small house inhabited by the Lohman family. The little house contrasted against the tightly packed city because it was barely more than just a scaffolding. It appears to be falling apart and vulnerable to the elements. Broken lattices create gaps that we can almost feel a cold fall wind blowing through. The characters inhabiting this set are trapped inside the city, but the missing wall suggests that they're exposed and unprotected by the house. This contrast reflects the emotional realities of Death of a Salesman, the tale of Willie Lohman, an aging, struggling salesman whose career is in steep decline. Willie and his wife bought this house almost 25 years ago, and they've been paying it off ever since. The story wanders back and forth between Willie's past and present, and we see just how tightly Willie has been clinging on to memories and fantasies that distort the past in order to justify his present failures. In reality, though, as he got older, the city grew and became more tightly packed, while the house he's been paying off for 30 years decayed and started to fall apart. To cope, Willie's been crafting more and more elaborate lies to protect himself. Biff, Willie's oldest son, sees himself as the primary victim of Willie's delusions. As Willie ages and his window of opportunity to achieve greatness closes, Willie places more and more pressure on Biff to do what Willie could not. On learning of his father's rapidly declining mental health, Biff reluctantly agrees to go and ask an old employer for a business loan. The hope is that he'll strike out as a businessman to find the success that Willie couldn't. When this meeting goes horribly wrong, and I mean like Biff does some light kleptomania kind of wrong. Biff realizes the depths of denial that he and his whole family are trapped in.
I could never get anywhere because you blew me so full of hot air that I could never stand taking orders from anybody. There's no spite in it anymore. I'm just what I am, that's all.
The story ends with Willie's self-inflicted, off-screen death. At his funeral, his wife Linda remarks that she made the last payment on the house today. Death of a Salesman is a story about denial. A denial that was required in order to keep living in a world that's become more hostile, more competitive, and more crowded, all while living in a house that's falling apart. This house was a major source of inspiration for the design of the Marquez farmhouse.
Now you know!
The similarities between the Lohman house and the Marquez farmhouse don't stop at the aesthetic. They're both houses of debt. We eventually learn
They took out a bunch of loans, and had this place built. Weaver had debt too. A lot of it. All tuition. She had no income. None of them did. I think eventually Weaver put those math skills to work on all the red numbers in the family checkbook and got a clear sense of just how hopeless their situation was. So, she left. I guess she drove away in the middle of the night. They woke up in the morning and the car was gone. Never came back.
until tonight. This is the night that Weaver came back. The night that ghosts will be reckoned with. The night when the scales fall from our eyes and we finally stop denying reality. But not quite yet. The problem is, we set up that dang TV wrong. Weaver lets us know.
That's not how it's supposed to look. You've made a mistake setting it up. Is it a foreign object to you? Which of your parents was it who wouldn't allow you to watch television?
I know how to set up a TV.
Okay, I'm skeptical. You have it all backwards. I'm not surprised, are you? Have you been paying attention? I don't think you have.
Weaver thinks we're in denial when we insist that we're able to set up a TV just fine. She wants us to start paying attention.
Keep your eyes open, Conway. Especially in the dark.
Emily, Bob, and Ben from the gas station will be our Greek chorus on our journey down the Zero. They'll sing us songs, giving us a clue about how our characters might be feeling. At this moment, when we leave the farmhouse, we enjoy their first song.
You got to walk that lonesome valley. You got to walk it by yourself.
They're singing this song to us to reinforce the idea that it's not going to be easy keeping our eyes open or paying attention. We're about to embark on a very difficult journey. Paying attention is only the first step, and even that's no picnic. However, Emily, Bob, and Ben aren't entirely right here. While we'll have to walk this valley one way or another, it might not be lonesome. Our next stop is the Zero's on-ramp, and Weaver gave us directions, so we should definitely get there, and... Wait a minute, this isn't an on-ramp. It's a mine? This is where we meet our first companion. Shannon is a TV repairwoman, and she's at the mine looking for something. Conway, of course, agrees to accompany her into the mine because it's really dangerous to go alone. And Shannon's going in that mine. Whatever Shannon's looking for, Weaver told her it would be in there. And since this is the first time Shannon's seen Weaver in decades, she's inclined to take her seriously. But once we go into the mine, things go south pretty quickly. Conway's leg is crushed in a cave-in, and Shannon immediately rushes to him and asks if he's all right. We're given the option to insist that, no, he's fine. In fact, we're given this option a couple times, but no matter how much we try to insist, it's all just denial. As per usual, our choices can't impact the events of the game. Conway's leg is hurt, and he's stuck in a mine. It turns out that this is the mine that Shannon's parents died in. They were miners, and the company they worked for made them not only buy their own safety equipment, but pay to power that equipment. And they paid not in cash, but using a currency that the company made specifically for its workers. It's called company scrip, and workers could exchange it at the company store, Or in this mine, they'd insert it into little kiosks to get a little bit of power for fans, lights, or pumps while they were working. Super fun fact, this was a real and common practice in the US. A new miner might get charged for their shovel on the first day, putting them in a debt they might never repay, right on day one. This meant they'd always be paid in scrip and never actually make a wage. And company scrip was distributed as recently as 1964. One day, the mine flooded, and the miners found themselves unable to escape. They turned off all their lights and spent the rest of their scrip just to power the pumps to try and get the water out. But it wasn't enough, and they drowned alone in the dark. As we travel through the old mine on a cart, if we turn off our light, we'll see the miners' ghosts lurking. Conway asks Shannon if she's okay being here. And Shannon says she's fine, but how could she be? Maybe this is just me, but it kinda seems like denial. We finally make it out of the mine and go back to the Marquez farmhouse so Shannon can fix Weaver's TV. And again, we're entranced by the glowing screen. But this time it's different. With Shannon here to make adjustments, the Zero appears. We watch Conway's truck enter a tunnel, the true on-ramp to the Zero. And we begin our journey to the underground. This descent marks the moment that we leave our denial behind and embark on a journey down as deep as we can go. The trip to Dogwood is going to be a long one. We begin outside a red brick government building. We meet Lula Chamberlain, a clerk by day, artist by night. She's reading a rejection letter for her latest exhibit, and she can respond in grace or in anger. Lula works at the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces, a government organization that repurposes locations and renames roads, often without consulting any locals. Shannon and Conway are here, and they're asking for directions to Dogwood Drive. The receptionist says, sure, Lula can help them out with that. She tells them she's on the 5th floor reviewing diagrams. But the clerk on the 5th floor says she's gone back down to her desk on the 1st floor. But then reception sends us to a junior clerk who asks for our ingestion card, who sends us to get, I don't know what that is. Can you just tell me where Lula is? Ugh, finally, thank you, Lula. Great news. She says it's just a matter of collecting the data from the archives and sending it to the computer for analysis. And the data should be in the archive on the 4th floor, so back to the elevator. On the 4th floor, a note in the logbook reads,
instruct clerks to focus on activities beginning with the letters A, B, C, D, E, or F, or activities most likely to involve research of subjects beginning with those letters. For example, cars is okay because it involves automotive, driving, brakes, etc. But air quality is not okay because it relates to health, safety, pollution, etc.
This is classic government bureaucracy. You have a simple question and then you get trapped in some maze of paperwork. In Act 1, we were sent on a wild goose chase to find the Zero, but that was more mysterious. This wild goose chase is just frustrating. A little anger is understandable here. We return to Lula empty-handed, and she wonders if the information isn't in storage. So we get directions to the storage facility from Marianne at the front desk.
Just get back on the Zero and drive until you hit the crystal. Then turn around.
Okay, a little vague, but sounds straightforward. Let's hit the road! Wait, what? This is what the Zero looks like. An unlit underground highway. In Act 1, we traveled on a flat highway map, represented by a wheel tracing the lines on a road map. Here on the Zero, the wheel is upright, rolling down a narrow line, casting enough light to only illuminate the walls of the cavern closest to us. The cavern is shown in an abstract white and black wireframe, as though the car is using echolocation or radar to trace the contours. The wheel traces the same line around and around the screen as we travel, Landmarks flicker in and out as we pass by, like radio signals coming in and out of range. Hypnotically moving in circles on the zero has a kind of soothing effect. The repetitive movement and the drone of the engine work together to create another half-asleep moment. Just like the TV in Act 1. And like the TV, we're still in full control of the moment. We can go forward, backward, or stop altogether. Though a lot of good it does us, we're literally going in circles here. And while each revolution around the map traces the same path, we pass different landmarks than the last go-around, as though the space is folding in on itself. The Bureau is long gone, and we're completely lost on the zero. In a story, when characters realize they're lost, they might say, "Hey, didn't we pass that tree before?" And then realize, "Oh no, we're going in circles." But on the zero, you think you're going in a circle, but that tree you should have passed isn't there anymore. Like the half-asleep moments, disorientation is another theme we'll see again and again in Kentucky Route Zero. After all, Act 1 began by asking for directions. There's a lot of secret detours you could take on the zero, just to see the sights. One stop is called Deja Vu. The truck slows to a stop, and Shannon says she's getting some deja vu, like this has all happened before. And it's like, yeah, Shannon, we've been going in circles for hours. But as the camera pulls out, we too find something familiar about this moment. Is that the mine from Act 1? Are those the ghosts? It's almost as though here on the zero, not only space, but history is folding over itself, making it impossible to keep your bearings. Eventually, we arrive at the random access self-storage unit. We should find what we need to get to Dogwood Drive here, but we also find a church? You see, the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces is itself a reclaimed space. That red brick building was once a cathedral, complete with giant organ. When the Bureau moved in, they relocated the congregation to this storage facility. But churches don't thrive in storage units. There's no worshippers left, only a janitor. He tells us that after the relocation,
it got a bit awkward to fit everyone in. The numbers quickly dwindled. Once folks started to see it as a thing that was falling apart, they lost their center of gravity, just started wobbling.
Even the preacher stopped coming. When it's time, the janitor puts a recording into a tape player and plays the homily to an empty storage unit. Tonight's homily is named Work is Play for Mortal Stakes. And at first, it feels a little judgy to be getting a lecture on the value of hard work while I'm playing a video game. Give a girl a break. However, as the homily wears on, the message's complexity emerges.
Beyond the church, this day is celebrated in remembrance of a violent protest in Chicago and to honor the 4 martyrs who were unjustly persecuted in its wake.
This sounds like the 1886 Haymarket Affair, a protest for the 8-hour workday. During the Haymarket Affair, one protester was killed and others were injured as the police tried to protect scabs and intimidate protesters. The Haymarket Affair is one of the origins of International Workers' Day, also known as May Day. On May 1st, you might see parades and demonstrations by unions, anarchist, and socialist organizations. That's a pretty diverse group of people. But on May 1st, they joined together to stand up for the rights and dignities of laborers and working class folks all around the world.
Did you know that?
Work is Play for Mortal Stakes is actually a line from a Robert Frost poem called 2 Tramps in Mud Time. It's about a man who's chopping wood and 2 out-of-work lumberjacks come by to watch him. The speaker feels self-conscious doing a task in front of 2 experts, even ones he demeans by calling tramps. He realizes they're continuing to watch because they want to see if he'll give up and offer them a job to chop the rest of the wood. The speaker, however, justifies to himself that because the weather could turn at any moment, it's better for him to do the work. After all, since they're out of work, they're probably lazy and selfish. And besides, he finds the work spiritually fulfilling. The poem concludes,
"My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation.
as my two eyes make one in sight, only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes.
By uniting his avocation, his hobby, and his vocation, his labor, he's made love and need one. It's a poem that privileges doing what you love over the purely material needs of these two tramps who just need a job. The preacher recontextualizes the poem by using these same words to describe the Haymarket affair.
Having not only pursued their vocation in their daily labor, but also having pursued their avocation in the form of protest, activism, community building, radicalization, scholarship, and finally, martyrdom. Their avocation being, as it should be for us all, to secure for our fellow workers the right to labor with dignity.
This is a pretty dark juxtaposition, and one that makes the speaker in this Robert Frost poem seem like an insensitive jerk. Gee, Rob, must be nice when your avocation and vocation are so easily united. Some of us don't get that. Some of us need to lay down our lives to protect basic rights. Work is indeed play for mortal stakes, but not in the way that the poem suggests. If the miners in Act 1 died because their company was negligent, those are some pretty mortal stakes we're working for, huh? The anger that these protesters feel, and the anger that the families of the miners feel, is present with us in this church that has been displaced for the convenience of bureaucracy. And what about Lula, whose avocation and vocation are not one? She works as a clerk by day and an artist by night, and when she receives a letter rejecting her exhibit, she's kind of angry about it. The anger here in Act 2 arises when avocation and vocation cannot be made one.
Now you know!
At this point, Conway's leg injury is really starting to mess with his head. Fortunately, Lula recommended a doctor, so we head off to see him at the Museum of Dwellings. At the museum, Shannon and Conway wander around. The camera is positioned very far away and fixed at this high-angle spot, rotating around to point at our characters. It's a bit like a panopticon, and it creates a sense of distance and surveillance. That feeling is reinforced when Shannon and Conway interact with anything. Click on this trailer, Conway goes inside and out of sight, and someone named James starts talking. And James isn't talking to Shannon or Conway. He's talking to the museum staff. This conversation is happening maybe tomorrow or something, definitely in the future. He's describing what he thinks our characters are doing in the trailer right now. He thinks they went through some papers because he found some folders had been pulled out. In this dialogue sequence, we get to respond to James as the museum staff. The staff want to know what these intruders were up to. This creates two layers of remove from the player, visually with the security camera point of view, and textually with dialogue that doesn't include either Shannon or Conway. This creates a power imbalance between our two characters, Conway and Shannon, and the faceless institution of the museum. It's uncomfortable, and as we get to know the museum's inhabitants, we see that they're struggling with the same power imbalance. That's right, I said inhabitants. People live in this museum. I mean, people need to live in dwellings, and it's a museum of dwellings, so of course people live in the dwellings in the museum. The interaction as the museum staff is a lot like the real-life history of academic, journalistic, and government institutions coming to study poverty in Appalachia. Originally, the goal of these poverty exposés was to put a recognizable, usually white, face on the poverty going on right here inside the US of A. And occasionally this worked to create policies that helped fund social programs for the region. And I'm all for giving a voice to disenfranchised people, but at a certain point, it kind of turned into gawking.
They do not know what to do about their own lack of food and clothing and shelter.
When that happens, it kind of turns into this very invasive form of entertainment. And it's frankly still pretty common. Sometimes it's even used to justify gutting those same social programs it inspired. This sense of faceless institutions that are here to observe but never serve is reflected in the dialogue between staff and inhabitants.
Hey, while I have you here, work's kind of slowed down, and it just seems like, I know you folks know what you're doing, but it seems like the residents are just kind of settling in.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I get that. Just, how about that roof, huh? You just write us a check and we'll finish it right up. I know you've got this museum thing going on, but you don't want to be slumlords now.
Did you see them poking around anywhere else?
Oh, sure. They were into everything. Walking around, looking at stuff, talking to people, talking to each other. I guess that's just what's gonna be like now. Living here.
There was a steady stream running down the back wall and right through my, this little exhibit thing. Anyway, it was just going like a river all night. It's a damn hazard. You've just got wires everywhere. Don't you people have anyone to look at this stuff?
Now, don't be angry with him, Walker. This arrangement is all very humane. The Bureau has come up with a perfect plan for these folks. The dwellings stay in the museum all day, and at night, a giant eagle carries each one individually back to the forest it came from. His name is Julian. Super fun fact, the US government has a long and prosperous history relocating people in Kentucky for, quote, infrastructure projects. So a giant patriotic eagle ripping people's homes out of the earth on the regular isn't as surreal as you might think. And yeah, it made a lot of people pretty darn angry. Julian the Eagle has a little brother. His name is Ezra. Ezra's family lost their home in a foreclosure during the 2008 housing crisis. Another debt haunting another family. They had to sleep at the bus station for a little while. One morning, Ezra found his parents just weren't there. Ezra will join Shannon and Conway on the rest of our journey together. The game will prompt us numerous times to decide, are Ezra's parents alive or dead? Does Ezra think they'll come back, or does he think they forgot about him? And how does he feel about all that? I never knew how to answer these questions. It always just felt so personal, so painful. These two brothers agree to give us a ride to the forest where Dr. Truman is. We return to the map, but this time as an eagle. We're no longer confined to the roads and we can fly anywhere. It's freeing. But whenever we stop, the eagle begins to circle and the map rotates with it. It makes it really hard to remember where we came from and where we were headed. It's another example of the game disorienting us. We eventually make it to the forest, and as we run through the forest as Ezra to Dr. Truman's house, we find vignettes between Shannon and Conway where we see just how much Conway has declined, and we learn a little more about these two characters' pasts. Shannon shares how she felt when Weaver left.
When she disappeared, I got pretty angry, and I guess I just stayed that way. I never really understood her, but I knew her. It's lonely without someone like that around.
As Shannon acknowledges the anger she didn't realize she was still holding, our Greek chorus, Emily, Ben, and Bob, play a song.
Lost all my money but a $2 bill. $2 bill, boys, $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill. I'm on my long journey home.
When we get to Dr. Truman's, Ezra asks Shannon what they were singing about. Shannon can respond travel, home, or hard times. And whatever you choose, the song here reminds us of the museum inhabitants whose homes are uprooted every night and are eternally traveling home, trapped in undeniably hard times. And it reminds us of poor Conway, who's fading fast, been traveling for hours, and nowhere near home. And as for that $2 bill...
So the anesthetic we'll use is called Nripnol TM. The way it works is, I'll count backwards from 5 to start the process, and then we'll just have a normal conversation while the Neuropnol TM takes effect. Then I'll get started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's talk about billing for a moment.
Seriously, billing? Well, under anesthetic. How is that ethical? It turns out that Dr. Truman is actually under contract by a pharmaceutical company that paid for his medical tuition. And that company is, of course, owned by the power company. And that power company has some pretty predatory billing practices. Which sucks. And it's hard to blame Dr. Truman. He needs to pay his tuition. And now he's debt-free. He's just an indentured servant, kind of, for a power company. It's confusing and infuriating, and I've just about had it with this endless debt that literally everyone seems to be in one way or another, and these bullshit government initiatives that just uproot people at a whim for an infrastructure project that probably benefits corporations while exploiting the workers. You know, the people being relocated? It was supposed to be simple. Find Dogwood Drive. But no! I'm going through a maze of paperwork and humans that direct me from floor 2 to floor 5 to floor 3, which is filled with bears that might eat me. Yeah, I'm angry. Let's just go to Act 3. Maybe we can find a better deal there. But first, a brief but important intermission. I started work on this video back in August, and honestly, I've loved every moment of it. I've actually never been to Appalachia before, but through researching the region and this game, I've found an understanding and an affection for this region that I never expected. Which is why, when Hurricane Helene hit, I was gutted. And I am not about to talk about this game, about a town in Appalachia that's destroyed by a storm, without doing something about the giant storm that devastated a number of towns in Appalachia. We just talked about the voyeuristic way outsiders have treated the region, but if we do nothing about this, we're kind of just contributing to the problem, aren't we? So, let's be part of the solution together. On October 29th, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, I'm hosting a charity stream for Hurricane Helene relief. That's about a week and a half after this video goes live. I'm going to be playing through Kentucky Route Zero, hopefully getting through at least Acts 1 and 2, with plenty of rest stops along the way to discuss all the things that I just couldn't fit into the video. From the surprisingly deep backstory of Joseph the gas station attendant, to references to the poetics of space, to Carrington! I absolutely love Carrington. Oh, and the font's actually really important. So we can all geek out and get a little lost on the Zero together. And if you donate during the stream, all proceeds will go directly to All Hands and Hearts Hurricane Relief Helene Response. Try to say that 5 times fast. Even if you can't donate a dime, I'm sending any ad revenue I get their way as well, so just hanging out and putting up with ad helps too. Anyway, I hope to see you there, and let's go to Act 3, shall we? Conway's dreaming. He's dreaming about Lisette. Lisette owns the antique shop that Conway delivers for, and Dogwood Drive is the last delivery before they close forever. Lisette's getting old, and she's starting to lose words. As Lisette talks to us, we'll have to fill in the blanks. Did her son Charlie study astronomy or aviation? Did his teachers call him imaginative or apt? When he fell off that roof and died, was it an accident, a tragedy, or just a shame? I just met Lisette, and already a few dialogue boxes in, I'm a couple tragedies deep. And that same dialogue box is prompting me to react to these tragedies. I'm left reading and rereading the dialogue for any hints as to how Conway would respond, or what would be the most helpful for Lisette to hear. Lisette is groping in the dark for the right word, and I'm here in the dark with her. The game is once again keeping us disoriented, putting us on our back foot. This time not spatially like Julian or on the Zero, but emotionally inside this conversation. We wake from the dream to find Shannon, Ezra, and Dr. Truman standing over Conway. His leg is gone, replaced with a prosthetic. It's not like any prosthetic I've ever seen, though. It looks like it was designed to look like bones, but it's still somehow mechanical. Bones and joints replaced by rods and hinges. It emits a yellow-orange light that glows and flickers. Making this mechanism specifically imitate bones makes it feel like the humanity is being stripped away and replaced with mechanical precision. This is another theme we'll see again and again. Conway is out of it, understandably. Dr. Truman, what are the side effects of that anesthetic? What was it called? Neripnol TM?
Typically, we see daydreaming, déjà vu, pensiveness, fugue states, irregular perceptions of time. About 15% of patients reported a generalized sensation of lateness.
Okay, super normal and not worrying at all. Dr. Truman, what about billing?
So it all runs through your electricity bill now. You can pay it back in full on your next billing cycle, or you can get on an energy credit payment plan. You'd have to call Consolidated for more detail about that. I don't really understand how it works. Something about generating electricity to send back to the grid.
Consolidated Power sure is their hands in everything around here. It's almost as if the goal is to consolidate power. The insidious thing about debt is that we often blame the dettee for having been foolish, irresponsible, or short-sighted. But for Conway, Consolidated Power has a monopoly on his means of survival. If you want to see tomorrow, it's the deal or it's death. So you take the deal, but the only bargaining chip you have is tomorrow.
The game was rigged from the start.
Shannon, Conway, and Ezra return to the truck and head out. But it's not too long before it breaks down. Stranded on the side of the road, they meet Junebug and Johnny, our newest companions. Junebug and Johnny are androids, and you'll hear their servos whenever they walk. They were built by... you want to guess? That's right, Consolidated Power. They're mining androids, built to replace the miners. You know, the ones that died in the mine. I mean, why bother hiring new miners? They're just going to die or, worse, protest. Just as with Conway's leg, we see Consolidated Power replace humanity with a mechanical facsimile. Junebug and Johnny, though, they have other ideas. They escaped and became performers. Now they travel from show to show in a motorcycle and a sidecar. They don't need much, just parts and each other. Junebug has some first-hand experience in fixing machines, so she can fix the truck. In exchange, the crew agrees to go to their show. They're running very late to perform at this bar. In fact, so late that they think all the patrons are probably gone by now. And the owner, Harry, will probably refuse to pay if no one comes to see the show. So these androids need butts in seats, and our little crew here is happy to provide. So we make a bargain to enforce another bargain. It's bargaining all the way down, kids. At the bar, Johnny and Junebug play a song called It's Too Late to Love You, a stunning number composed and performed by Ben Babbitt of the Cardboard Computer team. The lights go down and the roof of the bar lifts up to reveal a beautiful starry night. When the lights come back up, Junebug is wearing a resplendent blue gown. The song is ethereal and dreamlike and nostalgic. Johnny later calls their performance reverential, as though it might induce a reverie. That's right, we've stumbled into another half-asleep moment. Unlike with the Zero and the TV, this time we're obliged to sit through the entire performance. I mean, we did make a deal. But the game still finds a way to put us in the driver's seat. At the beginning of each verse, we're given 3 lines to choose from. Is this a song about the past? Longing? Regret? The song is suddenly imbued with more meaning because we chose its intentions. But regardless of our choices, the song always returns to the chorus. the verse we pick, the feelings we preface this chorus with. The facts remain unchanged. It's too late. Lateness is prominent here in Act 3. From Naripnol causing feelings of lateness, to Junebug and Johnny running late to their own show, to the song they choose to sing. And there's someone else who's late. Harry, the bar's owner. In the interlude, The Entertainment, we learned that, like most of our characters, Harry's in debt, and he's late on his payments. His patrons were buying drinks that they couldn't afford to cope with their terrible circumstances, and Harry just let the tabs pile up. So he struck a deal with the distillery. No, he didn't sell the bar. They don't want the bar. He took all those unpaid tabs and bundled them up into one giant debt that he sold to the distillery. And now his patrons aren't in debt to Harry, they're in debt to the distillery. In exchange, the distillery gave him more whiskey. Then, of course, Harry sells that whiskey back to his customers, who run up more unpayable tabs, and on they go. It doesn't make any sense. Why sell whiskey to people he knows can't afford it? And if he knows they'll never be able to pay, why bundle up all their tabs together to sell it to the distillery? And then why perpetuate the cycle by selling more whiskey? Well, why don't you ask Washington Mutual? Oh right, you can't. WAMU collapsed in 2008. That's right, Harry's bar is a giant metaphor for the 2008 housing crisis. Now listen, I hate talking finance. It's confusing. Some might even call it disorienting. So let's do this in whiskey terms. It all started when banks like Washington Mutual made a lot of really low interest loans to people so that they could buy houses. It made buying a house seem way more affordable because they didn't have to pay as much every month on their mortgages. So WAMU is like a bartender being really relaxed about your tab. But your tab is a subprime mortgage. And when the tabs started to pile up, the banks needed to start making some income, so they bundled up all those tabs together into one giant debt. That bundle of tabs is a mortgage-backed security, and they sold these bundles of debt to bigger investment banks, like Lehman Brothers, or in whiskey terms, the distillery. This gave the lending banks, like Washington Mutual, more money, which they promptly used to sell more subprime mortgages. Just like Harry reopening his bar to sell more whiskey to patrons so they can keep running up that tab. This vicious cycle continued until the entire US economy gave out. So why would the distillery buy bad debt? Why would Lehman Brothers buy mortgages they know they'll have to foreclose on? Well, lots of different reasons, but perhaps the biggest reason of all was the belief that the housing market would continue to grow. As long as more people want houses, there's more loans to sell, and the cycle continues. So how do you sleep at night if you're perpetuating the cycle? Well, if you can convince yourself that there's some chance, some sliver of hope that a big economic boon will come through and folks will start being able to make their loan payments, as long as you keep an ounce of optimism in your pocket, you'll always find a way to convince yourself that's definitely going to happen. But eventually, there will be a reckoning. And so, like WAMU, Harry is ruined. All he has left is an IOU from the distillery. That's the only deal left on the table, so Junebug and Johnny take it. But to cash it in, they need to go to the distillery. And that's back on the zero. So, back to the zero we go, and... wait, what is... oh, okay, that's different. Very different, actually. At the foot of a mountain, the truck is stopped, unable to cross a broken bridge. We can only ascend to the Hall of the Mountain King. A huge bonfire burns at the center of this scene. As we navigate our crew around the fire, the camera circles around them at a distance, while the bonfire casts shadows on the wall. This camera is an inversion of the one at the Museum of Dwellings. Instead of fixing the camera in one spot and rotating it in place, the camera is moving in a circle around a fixed point. Instead of framing our characters like they're intruders coming into a foreign world, it's like they're trapped in some sort of fiery snow globe where we can observe them. The Hall of the Mountain King is the home of Xanadu, Xanadu is a computer simulation designed to perfectly replicate the exact cabin that we're now inside. This snow globe effect replicates that feeling of observing a simulation from the outside. Xanadu, however, exists inside an old computer, complete with cathode ray monitor and typewriter-based text input. And it was made by an academic who's endured a lot of personal loss. Sounds familiar? No, this isn't William Crowther, but Donald. And Donald is more regret than man these days. He just wanted to smoke moss, live in a cave with his polycule, and build a perfect model of the universe. I mean, relatable, right? But his obsession with his research project got in the way. That project is Xanadu. Part text adventure, part hyper-realistic simulation of reality. But now, the equipment is aging, and the computer that runs Xanadu is barely operational.
There was so much more to it. Ornate labyrinths of memory, exhaustively simulated parallel cave ecosystems, real artificial intelligence built on sophisticated neural network algorithms. The birds in the forest could flock in 3 dimensions. The bats could learn to sing.
Due to its impossibly large scope, Xanadu will never be finished. It needs a constant supply of data in order to maintain the accuracy of its predictions. And his original collaborators, Lula and Joseph, yes, that Lula, have long since moved on from this doomed project. So Donald's left to watch his life's work slowly decline, and now he just sits with his pipe of moss, lost in regret.
I have my own ghosts, and I keep them in there, in Xanadu. It's running on that glorious, dusty machine. Take a look if you'd like. Too late to do anything but smoke and reminisce anyway. Far too late to do anything.
Donald, too, is struggling with feelings of lateness. And like the mine and the farmhouse, Xanadu is also plagued by ghosts. Later, we'll play Xanadu and see what transpired in this cave when Lula and Joseph left the project. Donald's entire identity is tied up in Xanadu, so when they left the cave and the bounds of the simulation, they became like ghosts to him. Donald believes it's too late to repair those relationships. But remember, tonight is a night for ghosts to show themselves. After playing Xanadu, Lula appears right here in the cave, as though she's been summoned. Lula and Donald's reunion is brief and sad. Back at the truck, that broken bridge is mysteriously repaired. The closure that reunion gave both these characters is made manifest right here in the infrastructure on the Zero. A lot more could be said about Donald, like how he relates to Samuel Taylor Coleridge's famously unfinished poem, Kubla Khan, or the bizarre saga of Project Xanadu, a hypertext system designed at the dawn of the internet that was in active development for 44 years. But unfortunately, we have places to be. And before we can play Xanadu and find Lula, we need to fix this moss-grown computer. Donald tells us that the computer was sabotaged by strangers, so we should go talk to them. And it doesn't look sabotaged, it's just covered in moss. But okay, Donald, let's go talk to him. Off we go, and... a graveyard. Shannon and Conway go to look for someone to talk to in the nearby church. They come back a little while later, clearly rattled, but with a way to fix the computer. With the computer back online, we play Xanadu in order to meet Lula again. She tells us it'll just take a little while for the computer to process the data, so we return to the bureau to wait for the results and finally learn where Dogwood Drive is. And as we leave the Hall of the Mountain King, Emily, Bob, and Ben play us out. A song about a Faustian bargain, a deal with the devil. And there's one more bargain we still need to make. Back at the bureau, we learn Dogwood Drive is just a little ways down Echo River. And lucky for us, we can catch a ride on a ferry. But wait a minute. What happened back in that church? Shannon and Conway sit on a pew in the church for a moment, and then... Below the church is the Hard Times Distillery. The strangers that Donald blamed are really just the distillery employees. And they have a pretty distinct look. This is Lem Doolittle, copywriter for the distillery, and he assumes we're here for the job opening. They're hiring for a new driver, and Conway would be perfect. Before we can ask him about the computer, Lem is already giving us a tour. During the tour, we get to drive around in a little cart, which I really enjoy. I love any game where I can tool around on a set of wheels. Lem is confident, cheerful, and proud when he talks about the distillery. He calls the equipment sublime machinery. He attributes a divine quality to the humming equipment around him. This is a place where the mechanical is worshipped, where supplanting humanity with machine is embraced.
We used to bottle everything by hand, but these machines are marvelously effective. Made things a bit complicated for the workers. After all, the distillery can't just fire them. How then would they settle their accounts?
Harry's Bar is not a unique arrangement for the distillery. This is how the distillery finds their workforce. It buys up debt and collects it in the form of labor. Even the debt is automated these days.
Once, years ago, we were as prisoners to the intricacies of our debts here. We'd have to account for everything on paper. Then she stepped out of the dark caves to show us the light of the formula. She had a brilliant grasp of mathematics and a saint-like way of speaking right through the numbers. Now, we just plug our daily numbers into the formula and run it all through the adding machine. We occasionally suffer some surplus drift, but she instructed us on all of the necessary adjustments. It was devastating to see our revered mathematician go, but she was needed elsewhere. Her legacy abides.
Again, something divine is attributed to automation, as though it's inherently good and should be trusted implicitly. That mathematician sounds like Weaver, and it sounds like here at the distillery, she was treated like a prophet, bringing the good word of automation to those who needed it most. And the distillery employees were the ones in need because each one of them is in debt.
This is Earl. He used to be a beekeeper. Borrowed some used casks to store the hives, but the interest accrued more quickly than the honey. Now he works for us here in logistics. Heather comes to us from the field of psychotherapy. She used to hit the bars to blow off steam after emotionally draining client sessions, but the remedy outpaced the disease, and her tab went to the distillery. Evening, Marge. Marge is an avid collector of vinyl records. She borrowed some quick cash from a distillery employee for a rare King Tubby dub plate. Must have been quite a find.
There is no regret in Doolittle's voice, and no one to pity here. This is the outcome of the deals they made. You found yourself in debt, and you'll literally pay with your own flesh, leaving nothing but a skeleton. And like Conway's leg, even that's been supplanted with something more mechanical in nature. The formula is Weaver's legacy in the distillery. It's how debt is tracked and calculated, and each one of these glowing skeletons is beholden to it. Even the adding machine, where everyone punches in and calculates their remaining debt, is placed in the front of the pews we came down on, as though calculating debt is akin to taking communion. By the way, this whole practice where you work somewhere because you owe them money is called bondage slavery, and it's still legal in some places. In 2005, there were over 8 million people worldwide in debt bondage, and that number's actually gone up since COVID. We've talked a lot about how the distillery values machines over humans, but there's still one step in their process that retains that human touch. The whiskey doesn't age in casks. It ages in casquettes. At first, they dug them up from the graveyard upstairs, and once they exhausted that supply, they started making their own. And if we read the gravestones, we gruesomely learn a bit about the whiskey their caskets produced.
James Schmatz, generous disposition, will be missed. HT8191T, field date June 29th. Notes of almond.
And when they exhausted that supply, they started making their own.
We build every cask by hand, right here. It's tradition. But I like to think our application of hands and hammers to the oak gives our stuff a kind of life.
Did you know that?
One of the major influences Jake Elliott cited when writing Kentucky Route Zero was The Crying of Lot 49, a 1966 postmodern novel written by Thomas Pynchon. Jake Elliott specifically cited the book's prolific use of illusions, and yeah, I see it. Kentucky Route Zero is a smorgasbord of references to literature, theater, history, computer science, architecture, etc. I found 79 different allusions and direct quotes in my research, and I'm certain I missed plenty more. Though I see the influence of The Crying of Lot 49 in other ways as well, especially here at the distillery. Lot 49 is insane. Much like Kentucky Route Zero, its plot is like playing Snake. Consuming each plot point makes navigating through the book windier and more difficult. The main character is a housewife, Oedipa Maas, whose ex-lover makes her executor of his estate when he dies. Weird start, and it gets so much weirder. For example, a psychoanalyst named Dr. Hilarious is always trying to convince Oedipa to just take LSD already. A conspiracy theorist named Mike Fallopian believes in a secret underground society of postal workers. A shady business is burning the bones of World War II soldiers down to charcoal and selling that charcoal to be used as cigarette filters. There's something poetically gruesome about taking the bones of someone who died in a war fighting for their country and putting them in a product that slowly kills you. This approach to metaphor and usage of dark poetic humor feels at home in Kentucky Route Zero, and nowhere more so than here in the distillery. Aging whiskey in human caskets, the metaphor is as blunt and gruesome as it is in Lot 49. Human lives reduced and exploited and transformed into a product. Not just any product either, a vice. A vice that some folks cling to when times are hard. It's another vicious cycle.
Now you know!
The distillery starts to darken. It's getting late, isn't it? And we still haven't figured out how to fix this dang computer.
Ah, the old man in the cave with the moldy computer. One thing I know, that computer's been running for decades. Switch it off for a minute and let it rest. That'll get you going, I'm sure of it.
That's all we need to keep going, to find Dogwood Drive. We can leave now, but Lem wants to show us one last thing. That antique adding machine. They use it at the beginning of every day to calculate interest, see how much they still owe. Remember that job opening I mentioned earlier? Lem welcomes Conway aboard. His shift starts immediately. He invites Conway to begin with a customary shift drink. But of course, Conway will politely decline because we've already got what we needed from here and he has somewhere to be right now. And wait, no, Conway, don't. Conway, no, stop!
Decent enough. Welcome aboard.
He's not working for you. We have to get back to this. He has a delivery to make.
If it's not your first shift drink, well, and there's the matter of this tour just now. My time and experience are billed at quite a premium. Yes, I'm afraid you'll have to work this off somehow. It's just the way of it.
Conway's first shift begins tomorrow. If we're overlapping the stages of grief on Kentucky Route Zero, Act 4 should represent depression. But I hate using depression in this context. It's too clinical. I long to think in more literary terms. And besides, it's absurd to assert that we're just now getting into the sad stuff, right? The entire game is soaked in melancholia. It's almost as though sadness permeates through the game, like water seeping through pores and cracks of a rock, slowly eroding it away, leaving room for more and more water and less rock, until one day, the rock is gone, and in its place, a river. Act 4 unfolds on a ferry floating down that river, the Mucky Mammoth. And this is Echo River. In the real world, Kentucky's subterranean Echo River is fed by a number of tributaries, one of which is the River Styx. In Greek mythology, the ferryman Charon carries souls across the River Styx from the land of the living to the land of the dead. Our ferry's captain is Kate, and her second job is as a doula. That means she delivers babies. Her job as a doula is to ferry souls into the land of the living. She's also an avid mycologist. At one point, she and Ezra take a detour to collect mushrooms together, and her interactions with this little boy are heartbreaking. Kate became a doula after her miscarriage, so seeing how good these two are together is as painful as it is touching. It was her miscarriage, a moment of tragedy where dying and being born became superimposed on top of one another, that inspired her to become a doula, and her past experiences are vital to her work. Just after her miscarriage, Kate got really sick and found that the only thing that helped was a specific kind of mushroom. And her love of mushrooms is very fitting, since mushrooms are decomposers that feed on dead and decaying organic matter, but the byproducts of decomposition enrich the soil for new life to grow. In a way, they act both as ferryman and doula, just like Captain Kate. Then we have Will, a kind of first mate on the ferry. He's a friend of Kate's, and he's in charge of navigation and fixing the giant mechanical mammoth. Anyway. Will has lived on the river most of his life, and he's a go-with-the-flow sort of guy. For example, he loves eating Kate's mushrooms, but prefers not to know the names of the varieties he eats. He says that mushrooms escape your erudition.
Did you know that?
Escape your erudition is a quote from John Cage, an avant-garde music composer and also co-founder of the New York Mycological Society. You might know him from his piece 433, which is just 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. He's a pretty idiosyncratic guy.
If you are amused, you may laugh. If you like it, you may buy the recordings. John Cage and Water Walk.
Okay, what's he doing? What is that? You put a fish on the piano? Oh, that's unpleasant. This isn't very good music. Now what's he doing? Oh, that's so loud. Oh no. Is he putting a surge protector in the bathtub? You can't do that. That's dangerous. Wait, what's he doing there? What is that? Okay, well, I mean, I guess you do have to water them, right? Why not? Oh my, is that a pressure cooker? That's so strange. Oh! The audience really liked that one. As you can see, John Cage's approach to music was, weird. And it's supposed to be. John Cage was part of the Dadaist art movement, which is honestly a lot like the rawr, XD, I'm so random internet culture of 10 to 20 years ago. The only real difference is that these people had an art degree and a mission statement. Basically, the Dadaists said, well, if Nietzsche says that nothing matters, that means we can do whatever we want. It's kind of a fun twist, right? Sure, you could sink into despair because God is dead, or you could have some fun with your limited time on this blue marble. So that's what John Cage is up to here with all this stuff. His whole deal was finding meaning and randomness in the unknown, and he found mushrooms to be delightfully random and bewildering.
The more you know about mushrooms, the less sure you feel about identifying them. Each one is itself. Each mushroom is what it is, its own center. It's useless to pretend to know mushrooms. They escape your erudition.
Kate and Ezra experienced this while hunting for mushrooms.
Now this one I can't really use, but I picked it just to show you. It looks a lot like a very popular eating mushroom around these parts, called a morel, but it's not a morel.
Kate slices the mushroom in half lengthwise. It's full of white fiber, the consistency of cotton.
This is the easiest way to tell them apart. The real morel is empty. This one, the false morel, is actually kind of poisonous.
The more you learn about mushrooms, the trickier it is to know mushrooms. Cage's lifelong love of mycology started with survival, hunting mushrooms during the Great Depression when he was a child with nothing else to eat. He kept growing as a mycologist for the rest of his life. He won a mushroom quiz on an Italian game show, and he made some extra cash by supplying a schmancy New York restaurant with mushrooms. He even taught a class on mycology for 3 years. Cage found the same escape from erudition in mycology that he did in music. The unpredictability of mushrooms mirrors Cage's pioneering of indeterminacy, a style of music composition where aspects of the music are left open, often even determined by chance every time you play it. His music embraced the unknowable and pulled from the listener a heightened awareness of their environment, not unlike the heightened awareness that mushroom hunting requires.
Now you know!
Will's attitude towards life is similar. He understands himself as living in an environment rather than a home.
I don't have a permanent address, or a pickup truck, or any change of clothes. I wash my laundry in the river, and in that moment, I'm truly free. I don't even have any shoes.
Will was once an organist and sometimes still practices his craft at the Bureau's giant organ. He used to teach French literature, but state funding got cut, and he's been here on the river ever since.
I've been traveling this river for more than half my life, more or less alone. I think I've seen it change quite a bit in all those years, but I can't say for sure. The water has a peculiar way of making a person forgetful.
The water Will is referring to is the water of Lake Lethe, where our ferry is headed. And it too is named for Greek mythology. In the underworld, souls drink from the river Lethe to forget everything about their mortal lives before they can be reborn. Styx is the first river you cross in the underworld, and Lethe is the last. Here on Lake Lethe, Will revels in forgetting.
I listen to the river's stories, and my own stories get fainter and fainter.
Will is also the narrator of Act 4, and he'll share stories from the river as we float along, all only half remembered, of course. His penchant for forgetting feels present in the soundtrack behind his stories, a drifting, dreamy synth with a mournful, slow acoustic guitar played over. It's melancholic, but also invites you to a peaceful oblivion. Will and Kate represent a dichotomy of mourning. Do we hold on to our past traumas as they rot, seeking meaning and harvesting the mushrooms that grow on the decay? Or do we let our pain float away from us, and with it, our memories and attachments? Our first stop is at a gas station, and if we stay aboard while the boat refuels, we can join Ezra and Will in the map room. No two trips down the river are the same, and landmarks drift upstream and downstream, so Will is always making new charts to reflect changes in the river. Again, we find ourselves confronted with this theme of disorientation. When we can't even make a reliable map, how are we supposed to orient ourselves and navigate through grief? And no two trips through grief are ever going to be the same. To be lost and to feel lost is an inherent part of the journey down the Echo, the journey through this stage of mourning. Our next stop is at the Rum Colony, a little bar on Lake Lethe. Kate stops here every night to pick up their trash because she's also the lake's garbage man. When Shannon disembarks, Junebug tells her,
Kate says to wander back whenever. This is a take-it-easy kind of stop. She doesn't even blow the foghorn to round up the crew around here. There's no point. Something about this spot is like wax in the ear when it comes to timetables and responsibilities.
Wandering around the Rum Colony in the warm glow of the tiki torches, we see what she means. Shannon sees some of the clerks from the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces, the ones that sent us into that paperclip labyrinth, and they're here celebrating. But what? They don't remember anymore. They're just enjoying the sound of the waves and the taste of the rum cocktails bathed in the scent of their floral leis. The Rum Colony is reminiscent of yet another Greek myth, the Lotus Eaters in Homer's story of Odysseus. Yeah, that's right, the same Homer you might have named the Bloodhound for. It's almost as though a long journey home is a major theme in this game. It's crazy. On Odysseus's long journey home, he finds himself lost on the island of the Lotus Eaters, a people perpetually in a state of bliss. The peaceful island inhabitants gladly share their food, a lotus flower that causes you to forget your family, your duties, your whole life back home. Like the island of the Lotus Eaters, the rum colony is a place of peace and bliss. It might be the happiest place in the entire game. Conway's enjoying his last night of freedom before he goes to work for the distillery, and he loves it here.
There she is! You just have to try one of these flower drinks.
What's it called?
I think he said it was a... how do you like that? I'll just show him the flower. Another one of these, I'll say.
Despite the warm, cozy glow, it's also hazy, hard to see, almost like something is obscuring a difficult reality underneath. If we squint through the haze, we see Conway's arm matches his leg now. It's been replaced by the glowing skeletal frame of a distillery worker. Since we're on the island of the Lotus Eaters, it's only appropriate that we're served up another half-asleep moment. An old friend of Junebug and Johnny's, Cyrano, is performing tonight. We can watch the hanging lantern sway and hear the music and the waves crashing in the background. If we choose to, we can give ourselves to this half-asleep moment, falling into a trance-like reverie as we listen. But this time, the game interrupts us. Patch, the bartender, receives a call. It's a wrong number, and the person on the other end is kinda rude. The call ends and you can resume listening, but that was a total vibe killer. Instead of giving us the power to wake up when we choose to, the game gives us a gentle nudge. There's a world outside this place, Lotus Eater, and eventually, we have to face it. Here in Act 4, our journey through grief is coming to a close. It's almost time to wake up. We reboard the Mammoth and continue on. A few stops later, Kate asks Shannon and Conway for a favor. Could we deliver a package to the telephone exchange? There's a bat sanctuary between here and there, and this ferry is too big to navigate it. We'll meet back up at our restaurant down current.
And be sure to check out all the plaques for, cool bat facts. Plenty of time.
At the entrance to the sanctuary, there is a memorial.
We claim these helmets in the names of folks who wore them, and we place them here in their memory, but also as a spit in the greedy green eye of that power company who bought up our old mine and traded our brothers and sisters' safety for a little more yield. But only you did. 28 good men and women dead when the walls collapsed and the tunnels filled with water.
A memorial to the miners who died in the mine we visited in Act 1. To Shannon's parents. Conway asks Shannon how she feels about this angry memorial, and Shannon can respond in 3 ways. And to each, Conway shows understanding and suggests a different purpose for the memorial.
It brings back some anger for me too.
I guess that's what a memorial should do, huh? Help you hang on to your feelings.
The other miners made this, but it should have been the company.
I see what you mean there. A memorial should be kind of an apology.
I'm glad it's here. People should remember.
Well, here we are, remembering. And I didn't even know it the first time around, but here I am remembering it now. And I think that's a fine memorial too, I guess.
To remember a painful event is to hold on to your attachment to it. And here, Conway and Shannon propose 3 things that attachment can do for you. Help remember the pain by holding on to your anger and empower yourself to stand against injustice. Help remediate the pain by acknowledging someone else's anger in hopes it mends bridges so a community can unite again. Remember for remembering's sake. To take the past not as a story, but history, and to acknowledge yourself as an inheritor of everything that came before you. We continue into the Bat Sanctuary, and we pass a couple distillery boys. They wave, Conway waves back. Shannon's really uncomfortable with his ease with these specters of debt, but Conway's sympathetic to his soon-to-be coworkers. Like all of us, they're just trying to make the best of a bad situation. It's not their fault, they're victims just as much as Conway is. We, however, are not allowed to share his sense of ease. The distillery boys follow us through the Bat Sanctuary, keeping their distance, slowly weaving in and out of frame. The entire scene is staged like a horror movie from the perspective of a killer stalking his victim. Inside the Bat Sanctuary, we learn why the bats need protection. Echo River's bats have been struck by white nose syndrome, a real epidemic in bat colonies in North America that's killed millions of bats. It spreads in winter when bats hibernate. A white fungus colonizes their skin, collecting most prominently on their cute little muzzles, giving infected bats a distinctive white nose. As anyone who's read Stella Luna knows, bats are blind and they find their food in darkness with echolocation. They use ultrasonic waves to draw a picture of their surroundings in the dark. Each sound they make gives them a momentary glance of their immediate surroundings. This reminds me of our ride down the Zero in Act 2 and the wireframe illumination of only our immediate surroundings. It's as if we were using echolocation to get our bearings in the dark. It was uncomfortable and a little bit scary for us. That kind of makes bats a sort of sacred animal in this game, because they're most at home, lost in the dark. In this fictional bat sanctuary, bats are protected with a giant net to keep infected insects out. These bats instead eat synthetic moths, but then to keep insect population outside the bat sanctuary under control, they've installed moth traps along the river. And they also collect the guano that bats poop out here in the sanctuary and distribute it along the entire river so it can fertilize the whole Echo River ecosystem. The scientist in me can't help but engaging in a little, well, actually-ism. In the real world, there's not much evidence that white nose syndrome is spread via contaminated insects. It's mostly passed from other contaminated bats or just spores on cave surfaces. Actual bat sanctuaries are mostly just decontaminating and monitoring bat populations for big shifts. But this inaccuracy points to the thematic relevance of this hibernaculum. Unlike the real world, this endeavor is far from hands-off. It's meticulously recreated and obsessively maintained. It's a full-time job, concludes one sign.
It's all fake. Except for the bats.
Yeah, I guess so. Reminds me of that guy Donald and his crew down there with the computer.
Donald created an imaginary world inside a real world. Xanadu is kind of sad and creepy, but the Bat Sanctuary is supposed to be a good thing. Are these fake worlds, this blurring between inside or outside, is it good or bad? Well, the game doesn't really take a position on this and asks you to respond as Shannon with relief or discomfort. And either way, Conway concludes,
all people need is to pretend we're home, and we can make it anywhere.
Whether it's good or bad, it might be necessary. It's happening, and it's up to us to make the most of that. And the remarkable thing about people, and bats, is that's exactly what they do best. We continue forward until the entryway to the exchange reveals itself. A hemispherical portal. The lights above look like stars. It feels like we're entering the land of the dead. Poppy is the last remaining operator here, still routing calls at the telephone exchange. She started working here decades ago. She worked alongside a dozen other girls, and she recounts that time fondly. She took a lot of pride in her work, especially when she spoke to customers.
It really is all about touch here. Sound is a vibration, a touch you feel in your ear. So my voice is my touch. When we're talking, we're touching. Even on the phone, that's an electric touch. An intimate little shock that makes your tiny ears tremble.
One day, Consolidated Power bought the exchange, and things started to shift. One by one, girls were laid off. Poppy says the increased workload was exhausting and very physical, until they announced Consolidated Auxiliary Switch number 30, and her job was entirely replaced by an automated switchboard. Well, mostly. Initial automation attempts were disastrous. The switchboard actually caught fire.
Their technicians determined that the phone system down here had been designed ad hoc over decades around the specific tempo of its human operators. So, short of replacing the whole thing, not to mention all the wiring, they'd have to work out the exact timing of every little human gesture that goes into routing a phone call.
So, Poppy answers the phones. She doesn't speak to any of the callers now. Instead, they have equipment timing her every move. She's training her own mechanical replacement now. But that change happened a year ago, and she started to wonder.
What if there's no cheap machine that's going to replace me? What if it's cheaper just to keep me here, filling in for the rhythm of the operators? What if I'm the cheap machine?
This whole reducing humanity to a machine thing just keeps popping up, doesn't it? There's Conway's leg, Junebug and Johnny, and don't forget the distillery. It's almost like, what do you call it?
Automation. So, let's say you run a company, and it's scaling up fast. You need to multiply your labor by hiring some people. But these stupid humans and their need to feed their families, it's just going to eat into your profits. You could avoid this whole thing if you weren't dependent on their labor. The problem is that right now each employee sells you their labor an hour at a time. You don't own them. What you need is a way to own the labor outright, instead of just renting it. I'm going to assume you see why the ancient solution to this, slavery, is an abomination. But did you know that the word robot comes from the Czech word for forced labor? That's right! The modern age has brought us a non-morally reprehensible way to own labor. With automation, these bottles are filled and cataloged mechanically and reliably. It has the allure of a how-it's-made video. Shiny machines churning out product, very few human faces, and an unshakable faith in the assembly line. But there's a cost. Poppy's job used to require people skills. She used to reach out and touch callers, but that's all gone now. Now less skill is required to do her job. We call this de-skilling. In Poppy's case, de-skilling isn't just about a job requiring less skill, but also less humanity. She doesn't need to know who's calling or who they need to be connected to. She has been reduced to a human automaton. Poppy no longer has negotiating power. Anyone could do her job. She's easily replaced. When executed like this, automation extracts labor from employees into an object that management can own. The machine, capital equipment. Worse, it dissolves their humanity. In the case of Poppy, literally removing her voice from her work. Automation like this takes from employees, stripping labor from their hands and humanity from their hearts, which shifts political power to management. After playing Kentucky Route Zero, you might come away thinking that's all automation is. And yeah, historically, automation has fucked a lot of workers over. But what about dishwashers? Me, I hate washing dishes, and I am so glad to own a dishwasher that automates my labor away, so I have more time to do what really matters to me. The difference is in who owns the machine. Automation is a political tool, and like any political tool, the people already in charge have the most access to it. But it can be used by anyone. When I want to decide if automation is good or bad, I look at who owns the machine and what they're doing with the power it gives them. Now, if you don't mind, I have to get back to what really matters to me. Ooh, hey! Whoa, where are you going, little guy? Oh.
When we finish talking to Poppy, there's suddenly this really loud humming. What is that? And then 3 distillery skeletons float by. There's the 2 from earlier, and I guess Conway's shift started. Shannon drifts her way to the diner to meet up with everyone. Of course, they note Conway's absence. Shannon can say,
"They took him."
Or,
"He left."
And, as always, the answer doesn't change the past. Conway's gone, and our grief won't change that. We can only decide how to hold that reality within us. Shannon goes downstairs to find Emily, Ben, and Bob singing this act's musical interlude.
This world is not my home. I'm just passing passing through. My treasures and my hopes are placed beyond the blue. Many friends and kin have gone on before, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
From a trip through an artificial hibernaculum, to a stop-off at a museum of dwellings, to Ezra's family losing their home, to referencing Odysseus's journey home, Acts 2 and 4 are in conversation about what it means to go home. Now, this mournful song about never feeling at home again reminds us how Conway might have felt as he shed his mortal flesh for the distillery. Some of Conway's last words echo in my mind.
All people need is to pretend we're home, and we can make it anywhere.
A lovely, optimistic view of things. We're completely lost and disoriented in a modern world. We might not feel at home in this world anymore, but maybe we can make a new home where there was none before, if we just fake it for a little while. Act 4 ends at the bottom of a giant hole, a cenote. Dogwood Drive is at the top, but with no ramp for the truck, the entire cast has to work together to haul the furniture upstairs. Let's join them, shall we? Act 5 begins as we emerge into the sunshine. The first sunshine our characters have seen since the sun went down over Equus Oils. This is the shortest act by far, and it's structured completely differently. Our cursor is now a firefly, and a cat chases this little firefly wherever we go. We approach people and listen to their conversations, occasionally chiming in with a... The camera is placed directly above the cenote, and as we move our firefly around the screen, the camera once again moves circularly, panning around the town. It's different from the distant surveillance of the Museum of Dwellings, or the claustrophobic encircling of the Hall of the Mountain King. The environment is expansive, and the camera looks optimistically out over the horizon. There's a sense of oneness with the environment, a feeling of peace, or even, dare I say it, acceptance. The scene opens the morning after a torrential storm, the same storm we kept hearing about on the Echo, and got caught in for a minute back at the Museum of Dwellings. Before last night, 2 horses lived just outside the town. Not wild, not domesticated. Everyone called them the neighbors. But the neighbors didn't survive the storm. We'll watch time progress from morning to midday to dusk as the town prepares for their funeral. A long time ago, this place was home to a people who migrated here from Central America. They were called Pueblo de Nada. They arrived on horseback, but immediately freed their horses. The neighbors were the last surviving descendants of those freed horses. While they lived here, Pueblo de Nada were perpetually building and tearing down and repurposing structures. Their creed was everything is an experiment. They would build, note the changes in human behavior, and adjust or tear down a structure entirely in response. An in-universe educational video about this fictional society reflects that they needed to be ready to let go of anything at any time in order to support their experiments. No one knows what happened to them and why, but it seems likely, as one person suggests.
They might have been conquered. Conquerors don't usually preserve their subjects' records.
We only know as much as we do about Pueblo de Nada because of the one structure they wouldn't tear down. The library where they stored extensive notes on their experiments. One townsperson, Rita, describes them and their library as
a group of utopian social experimenters. They kept their books here, and I think it was kind of the heart of their community. My friend Bert says the work of history is to find a pattern in the unasked questions. In the evening, when the Chinese wall was finished, where did the Masons go? Caesar beat the Gauls. Was there not even a cook in his army?
Did you know that?
Rita's friend Bert here is actually a little guy you might have heard of before. Bertolt Brecht. Brecht was a playwright, and you might know him as the pioneer of epic theater and the estrangement effect. The idea is rather than creating a story where you're supposed to identify with the emotional state of the characters, you direct the audience's focus to the text of the play itself. By, for example, having characters directly address the audience, or putting up big placards spoiling the end of the play. He hoped this would force audiences to stop empathizing with his characters and start reflecting on the nature of power and wealth and its impacts on the working class. By taking a more didactic approach, he hoped that audiences would bring a new awareness to their lived experience and feel more empowered and motivated to stand up for their rights as laborers. Which is probably why the House Un-American Activities Committee called him up to discuss his communist sympathies. This isn't the game's first Brecht reference. Throughout the game, Kentucky Route Zero uses a kind of estrangement effect for video games. Way back in Act 1, when we first met Shannon, the scene began by ripping us away from Conway's perspective. We're suddenly playing Shannon, and we greet Conway as a stranger. And it's like, isn't this our guy? Like, I know who Conway is. And it's not until Conway mentions Weaver that Shannon gets caught off guard and interrupts him, and that shifts the perspective back to Conway. This kind of thing is constantly happening in Kentucky Route Zero. We never get too comfortable with any one point of view. This does two things for Kentucky Route Zero. It keeps us on our back foot and keeps us feeling disoriented in the story, which is essential to the themes, but it also forces us to consider the situation the characters are in and why, and allow it to take precedent over sympathy for any one character. So, like a Brecht play, we're forced to engage with the ideas the game is putting forward. Here, Rita is quoting one of Brecht's poems, Questions from a Worker Who Reads. It's a poem about the gap between the grand achievements of powerful men and the unnamed hands who worked towards those goals. What role did the worker play in history? Why aren't they more celebrated? Kentucky Route Zero shares these questions by showing us mechanical skeletons in perpetual debt to their employer, and miners killed by a lack of corporate responsibility.
Now you know!
The utopian experimentalists that were Pueblo de Nada believed that the question of, how do we want to live, demanded a dynamic answer. Change the structure of your community, evaluate its effects, and then change it to see if you can improve it. This approach to society acknowledges that there's a lot of things that we have no control over. Technology, social norms, and of course nature, and it acknowledges that these forces will change human behavior, and we need to be prepared to adjust our own thinking and way of living in response. Sometime after the disappearance of Pueblo de Nada, Consolidated Power showed up. They built cheap, shoddy housing for the workers, and the Waffle House used to be a company store that only took company scrip. And there was never enough food. But if the townspeople started a community garden, the company would claim half the vegetables. One townsperson, Elmo, talks about how the company watched everyone, looking for signs of unionization. He talks about leading a demonstration down the town's only road. How the company had the cops on their side, not unlike the real-world Haymarket affair we learned about in Act 2. He talks about the strategies they used to unionize in plain sight.
We had 1,000 strategies to hide our numbers. We rotated leadership on the R. We had so many secret passwords. I never knew if I was speaking in code or shooting the breeze.
No, there's no love for the company here. Just ask Ron, who's spending the day digging the grave for the neighbors.
If this were still company property, they'd be off to a landfill. Cold sons of bitches.
The company ran a local broadcast station. For a while, they were using it to distribute company propaganda. When they finally pulled out of town, a judge ruled that the local station was the company's responsibility, and they had to continue paying for it. Of course, they did the bare minimum, not even providing basic upkeep. The whole thing became entirely volunteer-run. Remember our great chorus, Emily, Ben, and Bob? They're actually station volunteers. Well, they were station volunteers. Thanks to the lack of upkeep and the big storm, the station finally fell down last night. Emily stands in the wreckage, wondering if it's possible to rebuild another artist community or if she's better off moving on. Given their experiences with the company, the townsfolk find themselves haunted by ghosts of the past, sometimes literally. Meanwhile, Shannon and the rest of the newcomers begin hauling furniture to 5 Dogwood Drive. It's not really a house, it's this. An A-frame archway, completely empty. There's no one here to say, put that chair here, put that couch over there. Shannon remarks,
now we're setting it all up, trying to reverse engineer this person we've never met. I kind of feel like we are that person. We're making that person. Right now. Together.
5 Dogwood Drive represents the future. It's what we make it. We must confront that the future is ours to build. And sure, that sounds exciting and optimistic, but it's also kind of a lot of pressure, isn't it? How do we know that we're doing it right? Well, we don't, but we gotta try. In that answer, I see the spirit of Pueblo de Nada, the eternal experimentalists. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Be ready to let go of anything. Nearly all the residents and newcomers find themselves at a crossroads. Like Emily in the station, they're all individually wondering, do I stay here and rebuild? Or do I go? Is the damage from the storm and the weight of the history of exploitation too great? The game largely puts this decision on your shoulders. For most of the characters, you have to respond that you'd rather stay or go. Meaningfully, it doesn't judge your answer. We've spent the whole game Katamari Damashiing a little community of outcasts, and it's only with their help that we've gotten the furniture here. Along the way, the game made clear the importance of unions and the power of small artist communities. But here at the end of the game, it still asks, do you want to stay and rebuild, or do you want to leave?
I know some people had to leave already. I don't judge anyone for that. We're going to bury these horses. And what do you think will happen next? We'll all walk out into the woods and leave this place empty. No, I guess some of us might stay and build again? That's all right. It couldn't be me. But to try is your birthright.
By making stay or go an earnest question, by refusing to lead you to some right answer, the game makes a powerful statement. While community is essential to the type of future we hope for, it acknowledges that you might not have found the right community. It respects your right to go and seek something new, to explore and to learn about the world. Maybe you'll return, or maybe you'll have found your community elsewhere. It also acknowledges that if you choose to stay, you're attempting to build on something that has failed before. And that's fine too.
Maybe some new community will grow up out of the rubble. It happened before. I hope they have an easier time.
Look, we've tried many times before, and it's never worked before, but it is something that we can try again to do now.
As always, no matter what you choose, the day ends the same, with the funeral for the neighbors. The community gathers at the grave of the 2 horses to try to find some kind of acceptance, not only with the horses' deaths, but the storm's devastating effect on the town. Emily sings the Greek chorus's final folk song.
I've heard of a land of joy and peace and wonderful life, a beautiful place of mansions fair and skies so bright, where all who believe the Savior dear forever shall stay. And having been saved by grace divine, I'm going that way.
It's a funeral song about accepting your own death and ascending to heaven. But read a different way, it could be a song about slowly making our way to a better future for ourselves. Back in Act 1, we met a lot of ghosts. In the mine, we saw ghosts of miners. In the farmhouse, we saw Weaver disappear. And in the basement of the gas station when Emily, Ben, and Bob couldn't see Conway. And we've certainly heard a lot about ghosts in the following acts, but it's not until here at the end of the game that we meet another ghost. A lot of ghosts, actually. As Emily's song continues, more ghosts begin to appear. At first just a few, and then more and more and more. And by the end of the song, they fill the whole screen. Earlier in the day, we found Shannon sitting with Emily, Bob, and Ben. Shannon's teaching them how to play a tabletop game, but they need a 20-sided die. Shannon reaches into her jacket. Actually, it was Conway's old jacket, and she finds the 20-sided die he picked up way back in Act 1. This is the same tabletop game that Conway observed them playing in the basement. Of course they were playing a game, just like we're playing Kentucky Route Zero. And we assumed when they didn't acknowledge Conway that these three were ghosts. But they don't seem like ghosts today. They're here, talking to Shannon. In the interlude, before Act 5, they were actually looking for some ghosts themselves. In the basement, they couldn't see Conway. Here on the other side of the journey, after witnessing Conway pass into the underworld, we can recontextualize that early scene. Emily, Ben, and Bob weren't the ghosts. Conway was. He's the afterimage, the history that we carry with us when we build a new town together. A point of clarification. This isn't like a they were dead the whole time theory crafting kind of ending. Conway wasn't literally a ghost the whole time. Kentucky Route Zero is a deeply figurative and political game. These unreal, impossible story moments are not supposed to be crazy twists to freak your mind. They're subtle. Blink and you miss it. Okay, except for Julian. Remember how I said the game had a magical realist tone? This is what magical realism looks like. Magical realism isn't just, wow, isn't that crazy? It's intentional. It blends magic, emotion, and political meaning together.
It's a very political genre, but it's not a sort of... It's very political, but it's very human in its scale because it treats the political as a very kind of emotional, sometimes kind of mystical reality, which is how we really relate to it, right?
Here at the funeral, we've been joined by the ghosts of company workers, the ghosts of Pueblo de Nada. They're the ghosts of the many, many attempts that this town has made at being home. These ghosts are gathering to mourn the death of two horses, but also to mourn their own deaths. And perhaps, if we're being pessimistic here, they're mourning the death of the town. Or maybe, at the center of the town, there's an effigy mound. Hundreds of years ago, before even Pueblo de Nada, someone piled earth in this distinct pattern. A long line that makes this symbol. It spirals, it switches back, and it meanders off. There's actually an achievement for walking the path of the effigy mound with the kitty. You might have noticed throughout the game that the camera has a habit of making some kind of circular movement. In the museum, the Hall of the Mountain King, even on the Zero, we go round and round. But maybe we weren't going in circles. Maybe it only felt like we were going in circles, but actually we were spiraling, switching back, meandering towards something better. I believe that holding a funeral is an inherently optimistic act. Hear me out. The person in the coffin or urn is gone, and nothing's changing that. We attend a funeral to remember the deceased. We reflect on what they meant to us, to count their attachments to the community. Their death snips some of those attachments, but not all of them. They live on in our memories, we say. They live on in the attachment we hold to the idea of them. A funeral is a space to survey all our attachments to whoever or whatever we're grieving, to account which attachments have been forcibly snipped and which ones remain. It's a place to acknowledge that this soul will no longer be with us. We talk about who they left behind, but isn't it us who's leaving them behind? Chances are, we're still going to be here tomorrow. A funeral acknowledges that we remain. If that's all true, then a funeral is optimistic because it acknowledges that while they're gone, we're still here. And tomorrow, we'll still be here. And the funeral says, that matters. I promised a long time ago that I'd explain to you what Kentucky Route Zero was mourning. And now that you've taken the catabasis, I can finally tell you. In its most literal terms, Kentucky Route Zero is a game about showing up in a town in Appalachia that was just devastated by a storm. For the folks caught up in Hurricane Helene, that's not an abstraction, it's a reality. I started this video in August, way before Helene was a topic in the news, because I wanted to share the ideals and insights I found in this game. I thought they were beautiful and strikingly relevant to the moment of history we're currently living through. And here, after Helene, the message feels more literal, more urgent. Not just horses, but people died. Homes were lost. Thousands of lives will be forever changed by that storm. For them, there's no shortage of people and places to mourn the passing of. For us, the people for whom the devastation is just an image on the news, well, we aren't immune to experiencing grief either. Grief is always complicated, and that's why this game is kind of hard to follow some of the time. Today, I focused on what the game says about labor and populism, but there's so many other beautiful and inspired analyses of this game. Aubrey Annable is an academic who writes about affect theory in video games in chapter 1 of her book, Playing with Feelings. And she writes this beautiful analysis of how Acts 1 and 2 uncover the secret histories of women in technology. Meanwhile, over on the Steam forums, one person shared a heartbreaking story about how they connected deeply with Conway through their own alcoholism. And as of posting, had a few years of sobriety under their belt. So if all these takes are correct, what's Kentucky Route Zero actually about? Okay, this is the last time, I swear.
Did you know that?
Cruel Optimism by Lauren Berlant is a book that stands firmly on the shoulders of previous philosophers. And as such, it expects we've climbed those shoulders ourselves. What I'm saying is, it's a tricky read. Lots of reading the same sentence several times over. But when I got out my reading glasses and philosophy decoder ring, I finally began to understand what exactly cruel optimism is. And I found a pretty straightforward answer. Berlant defines cruel optimism as
when something you desire is actually an obstacle to your flourishing.
For example, let's say you stay at a job you hate for years because your boss keeps insinuating you might get a promotion. And you keep staying because you still believe one day you'll get that promotion and it'll all be worth it. Suffering for years at a job you hate will be justified. But while you're suffering, isn't that optimism that you'll get promoted somewhat to blame here? At the end of the day, you're still working a job that you hate. And if you didn't have that hope that one day you'll get promoted, you wouldn't have any reason to stay. That's cruel optimism. We've talked about a few examples already. In Death of a Salesman, Willie Loman warps his entire reality to continue laboring under the delusion that he and his sons will be great men one day. In the 2008 housing crisis, the vicious cycle was perpetuated by the belief that the housing market would continue to grow exponentially. Forever? Question mark, question mark, question mark? It's easy to look at someone laboring under a cruel optimism and think, well, they're just in denial. They really only have themselves to blame here. However, Berlant argues that's exactly what makes this optimism so cruel.
Sometimes the cruelty of an optimistic attachment is more easily perceived by an analyst who observes the cost of someone's or some group's attachment. But if the cruelty of an attachment is experienced by someone or some group, even in a subtle fashion, the fear is that the loss of the promising object or scene itself will defeat the capacity to have any hope about anything.
The optimism is cruel because you've built up too much of your life around it. To let go of your attachment to whatever it is you're hoping for is to let go of part of your identity, your reason for being, or even actual material things that you've grown attached to in your lifestyle. Basically, even considering that the object you desire is no longer a possibility is just way too scary. The period where you're stuck inside your cruel optimism, stuck at your dead-end job, for example, Berlant calls this the impasse.
Usually, an impasse designates a time of dithering from which someone or some situation cannot move forward.
Berlant argues that cruel optimism is a deeply US American experience, and it's worth noting here that no one is immune to cruel optimism. Anyone around the world could fall for it. But this idea that the US is the world's foremost producer of cruel optimism kinda sounds right to me. A story. Once upon a time, I was working with a European person who had just moved to the US, and they wouldn't stop complaining about it. So one day I responded, a little annoyed, "Well, if you hate it so much, why are you still here?" And they looked shocked for a moment, and their whole demeanor transformed. They smiled wide and said,
"Because you're also optimistic. You believe you can do anything, even when all the evidence says otherwise."
I was really taken aback. I don't think of myself as especially optimistic, but on more reflection, yeah, I think we US Americans have a nasty habit of giving ourselves to a kind of pathological optimism. As a people, we've witnessed the death of the American dream. A house with a white picket fence, 2.5 kids. In this economy?
Now in this economy, especially in this economy, but in this economy.
And yet, I still catch myself clinging to fantasies of what Berlant calls the good life, and stuck in a few impasses of my own. Kentucky Route Zero is a game rooted in US history, and it seems to hold an implicit understanding of cruel optimism. For example, at the distillery, what keeps the distillery skeletons working? If they refuse to work, it's not like the company could take more from them, right? They could just hit the bricks, as another famous skeleton once said. And why does Lem always start his day at the adding machine? His interest compounds with or without a daily calculation. If he's doomed to never pay it off, why bother? The implication is that they all believe that one day they'll pay off their debt, and then they'll be free. Lem is holding on to that attachment, even though it's keeping him from flourishing. The folks at the distillery are stuck at the impasse. But most of Kentucky Route Zero seems to take place after the impasse. After cruel optimism has perpetuated itself, we come to the mine decades after the miners died at the hands of a negligent employer. We come to the town after it's been destroyed by the flood, and Kentucky Route Zero mourns each one of these impasses. It mourns the catastrophe, but it also mourns the promise of the future that held us in that impasse. Then, what do we do if we find ourselves grieving the end of our own impasse? I kept pulling your attention towards examples of disorientation and half-asleep moments. In the context of cruel optimism, disorientation starts immediately after leaving the impasse. In the impasse, you are sustained by your belief that one day you'll get what you're dreaming of. You know where you're going. But the moment the impasse collapses on itself, you feel lost, and you'll keep feeling lost throughout the entire grieving process. That's the disorientation that Kentucky Route Zero so strongly wants us to feel. That moment of discomfort or fear when you don't know where you are, that's the moment to recognize. Because in that moment, you've broken out of the impasse. As Junebug puts it,
"It's no shame to be lost."
Meanwhile, the half-asleep moments orient you on your journey through mourning. In Act 1, it was during a half-asleep moment that we found the zero. They're times of passive reflection. You wake up feeling refreshed, your fear a little further away in the rear view. They guide you into the next step of your journey through grief. If disorientation begins the journey, The half-asleep moments are when you're looking down at your compass. And the journey, as we saw it, is never straightforward. It might spiral, it might switch back, or it might just meander off in another direction. Kentucky Route Zero ends with a funeral. And a funeral is an optimistic act. Not cruel optimism, but something else. Maybe it's a kind optimism. It's a space to reflect on our attachments. The attachments that were snatched from us by forces beyond our control. The attachments that shackle us to a future we can't flourish in. And the attachments that strengthen us as we move into the future. A funeral says, "You are gone. I am here. Tomorrow, I'll still be here. That matters. I care that it matters." A funeral for the impasse means the dream is dead, but it also means the dreaming can begin. So I'm inviting you to join me at the funeral, and I'm inviting you to dream up some new future with me, one that might actually be possible. If it's not, we can always just knock it all down and begin again. It's no biggie. As long as we remember that there is a future, that we'll have to exist in that future. So how do we actually do that? What does it look like? Well, for one thing, I'm going to do that charity stream for Hurricane Helene. You know, the one I mentioned way back in the intermission. These are folks that are mourning the many attachments that have all been forcibly snipped. And it's a part of the world that's become very dear to me in the making of this video. I feel really protective of it, especially after learning about all the trials and tragedies it's experienced throughout history. You know all those relocations and displacements I talked about in Act 2? You know all those predatory coal companies we talked about in Act 1? The rest of the country had material benefits from those sacrifices. We used those resources to modernize, support war efforts, survive oil crises. It's honestly nuts how much this part of the country has done for the rest of us. And now it's time for us to have their back, for us to care about a better future for them. And the other concrete way I'm going to care about the future is vote. I don't know about you, but here in the US, we have this whole big election thing coming up. So I'm going to vote. And if it's not too late and you're eligible, I'm going to encourage you to vote too. Personally, I hope to vote for my country's first lady president. And even if she wins, I fully expect to be protesting her policies. That's democracy, baby! And here's what else sucks. I, like many Americans, live in a place where my vote for president effectively doesn't matter at all. Thank you, Electoral College. But despite that whole shit sandwich, I'm still going to encourage you to vote. And I don't even care who you vote for. Write down Mario if you want. Yahoo! Though, unfortunately, I think he's too young for the gig.
Oh, no!
Here's why. Voting is one of the easiest ways to signal to yourself that you'll still be here tomorrow, that you care what happens in the future, that you want to say in what that future looks like. And be sure to vote in local elections too. Your vote probably will make a difference in those races. But okay, what if you're watching this when there's not an election coming up, or you're too young or something? What can you do? Here's a little brainstorming session for you. Go for a walk. Get a little exercise you normally wouldn't. Keep that body strong to meet whatever nonsense tomorrow has planned for you. Go to a local museum and learn some history. Orient yourself by learning about everything that came before you. Try to understand that context in your daily life. Join a new community. Go join a team sport or find an interesting meetup group or something. Build a community of people around you. People whose back you'll have and who'll have your back in return. Community is essential to surviving after the impasse. Feed your spirit. Listen, I'm not here to tell you what makes you feel more in touch with the universe. It's deeply personal. For some people, that might be church or temple. For other people, it's meditation or journaling. Heck, it might even be something like tarot and crystals. It's all good in my opinion. Just keep that spirit fed. It's still going to be here tomorrow, and that matters. I could go on, but I'll stop there for now. Think of it like self-care, but for all of human civilization. The goal here is to strengthen yourself in preparation for the end of an impasse that you can't see coming, because when that moment comes, it's gonna be rough. So just repeat after me. You are gone, and I am here. Tomorrow, I'll still be here. And that matters. I care that it matters. Oh man, that was long, right? Holy shoot, thank you so much for joining me all the way until the end. And I have to thank all of the wonderful human beings who lent their voices to this project. There's so many of you this time, and I'm really lucky that they were all amazing to work with. And a special thanks to the folks from consolidatedpower.co. Not the company from the game, of course. Those guys suck. But the folks at consolidatedpower.co who run a fantastic wiki for Kentucky Route Zero. It was an invaluable resource in putting this together. There's full scripts for all the acts and interludes. There's maps. There's instructions on entering debug mode. It's insane, and it's definitely worth checking out for any true KRZ fan. But I gotta tell you, my cutting room floor is less like a floor and more like a swamp. I cut out so many cool things. Like the connections to computer program and information theory, I totally skipped them. Most of the little tourist traps you find along the way, zoom, we didn't even slow down. And the interludes, I think the interludes are so interesting, but I barely even acknowledge them, which is honestly kind of embarrassing. So if you want more KRZ facts and chats, and it's before October 29th, I hope you'll join me at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the Hurricane Helene Charity Relief Stream. We're going through Act 1 and 2 and chatting about all the interesting little things that I completely skipped in the first 2 acts of the game. Plus, it's a chance to donate some dosh to a highly relevant cause that's in desperate need of help right now. And even if you can't, all the ad revenue from the stream is going straight to the cause as well. So, as the gas station attendant on Echo River says,
a passenger contributes to a journey too.
The other bit of news that I have is, I'm starting a Patreon. If you like my stuff and you want me to keep making it, you can directly support my efforts with a monthly contribution. There's a few tiers right now, and it's early days, so I'm not totally sure what all the benefits for each tier are gonna be. I'm thinking maybe like a patrons Discord server could be fun. I don't know, maybe I'll sing you a birthday song. It's all a bit up in the air as of publishing this video, so I guess what I have to offer today is that if you join now, you're kind of first in the door of this new little community I want to build, and we can kind of figure out what that looks like together. It's gonna be a journey, but hey, you made it this far, right? You probably like long, winding journeys. I'm really looking forward to reading about your experiences with Kentucky Route Zero. So please, if you have something in your heart, put it in a comment for me. I'm not just being an engagement-y, algorithm-brained YouTuber right now. I actually just really love reading every single comment, even if I don't really have a response. It's always a lot of fun to hear all the different perspectives on a game I've covered. So I hope you'll jot down a few thoughts before you head out. I know I got a little political in this one, so a polite reminder to please be respectful in the comments. I mean, we all have to live on this dang planet together, so let's try not to make each other miserable while we're doing it, okay? I have a few other long-form videos on other games you might find interesting to watch next, and from time to time, I also really like making short videos showcasing small indie games that you probably haven't heard of, so there's some real gems to discover if you're feeling brave. Thank you again so much for watching all the way to the end. It really does mean a lot. Happy spelunking out there.
That's why I love Nestle Crunch.